Good evening, everybody, and thanks for coming. My name is Joe Owens, and I've been a member of the group for a couple of months now. Carl was kind enough to invite me. I'm a Scrum Master, and I also held a lot of certifications in technology, and I just happen to really love generative AI. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to blow through these slides pretty quick so that we can get to the meat of it. Just want to set the table. Today we're going to be discussing Chat GPT prompt iteration, and we're going to be doing that through a custom GPT that I wrote called the Wordle Wizard. So to do prompt iteration process, you start with just creating by general prompt. You continually run tests, you evaluate, you continue to refine, and then you repeat. And basically, you'll notice what we have is just a conversation with the GPT back and forth, and it does something wrong, and you go, why are you doing that? And it comes back and says, I'm sorry, let me try that again. It's a pretty simple process. The Wordle Wizard helps you solve the Wordle puzzle. Hopefully you're somewhat familiar with the New York Times game, and it's going to interpret the colors of the tiles, and it's going to give word suggestions. It does pattern detection, and then it gives you feedback and suggests what words may be good or may be bad. Let's go on to the next one. So the difference between this and just going to chatgpt.com and saying I want to play Wordly is that I've given it several pieces of knowledge, and knowledge is something that you can add to a custom GPT that helps it focus and helps it understand what it is you're trying to do. So the knowledge that I've given it, and they're just text files, and you upload them to the knowledge section when you're configuring. I'll show you all that later. What I've added is that the list of Wordly words. I did research, and it turns out that every word that will ever be in a Wordly puzzle is actually baked into the code. I was able to pull that out. It doesn't provide you with past Wordly answers, but because the internet is the internet, people will keep track of that stuff. So I provided it with a list of words that have been used in the past. I also did some research and gave it a knowledge of the best starting words and how to use starting words and position and the repeating consonants and the number of vowels and things of that nature. And then finally, I gave it information on letter frequency and common pairs. It can very easily look this stuff up through its just general knowledge that ChatGPT has. However, when we're doing the iterations and we're creating the prompt, we're going to tell it specifically to look here. And that way it knows only to rely on these pieces of knowledge when it's trying to suggest words. So here's how it works. It analyzes the clues, so we give it feedback and we tell it what colors it suggests a word, we put the word in, and then we go back and say, it's this word, and here were the colors of each one of the tiles. It analyzes the feedback and interprets the colors. Then it does a word suggestion. It should look at the word list first and validate that what word it's giving is a valid word, and then look that up against the previously used words and make sure it's not on there. Then it's supposed to go ahead and suggest a word. If it is on there, it's supposed to come back and say, no, this isn't a good word, I'm going to give you another one. When you're doing the feedback, it learns from its guesses, it adapts its suggestions, it starts looking at patterns, and then we continue to refine it. We continue that until the puzzle is solved. All right. Now, let's go back to the actual Wordly chat here. So I go up to here and I'd say, look for my GPTs. You can see that I've created a Wordle Wizard, which is a demo. I have a Wordle Wizard that I've actually released into the ChatGPT store. Then you can go look it up. I think I put the link at the end of this if you want to try and use it. But I created this demo because the one that I have currently is pretty well dialed in, and I wanted to give us something that I know is going to give us some errors so that we can try to work with it. So we click on here and we go into Edit GPT. Now, for those that don't know how this works, you have a creation, and here's where you speak to it and you talk to it and you go back and forth. And then you also have a configuration where you name it, you have a description, you put in, I'm going to get to the instructions in just a second, but you put in some conversation starters if you want. You can notice that those are right here on the right. And then here is where we uploaded the knowledge, the list of words, the most common pairs, the favorite start words. This is a chronographical, that could easy for me to say, right? Chronographical list of words that have been used in the past. So I use it to run statistics. And these are the most common letters. Now, when you get into the instructions, they're pretty simple. It's just the base instructions that I created several weeks ago. I keep all the revisions of my instructions because I'm an old-time IT guy and it's backup. The general rules are here. There's not a lot of other bells and whistles, but you can see what you're basically doing is just you're telling it what the game mechanics are, that it should be using this text file for its words. It should be looking for past words and not repeat them. And then the letters and the patterns and then the field validations. Now, let's go ahead and start. So I'm going to say, start a new game. Put it over here and you should be seeing on the right hand of the screen the actual Wordly. I don't have the answer, so we should be pretty good there. All right. So it's going to suggest a new word and it's going to suggest a do. That's not my favorite word, but we're going to go ahead and put it in. I think one other clarification here, I really like playing this game, but I am horrible at word games, just awful. I visit my father, we watch Wheel of Fortune, he gets it with 5 letters and there's 2 letters left on it and I still don't know what it is. So just so everybody knows, this one of the reasons I created this is because I'm not really good at it and I figured this would help me learn, and it has a lot actually. So we'll go ahead and enter on that. Oh, and the other thing to know is that I am hopelessly colorblind. So these 3 yellows here, these look like green to me. And then when the greens come in, they're much darker and I can recognize those just because there's a difference in the shade. But yeah, these all look green to me, just so you know. All right, now that's enough embarrassing stuff about Joe. And then we put in is yellow, D is gray, I is gray, E is, and U is yellow. So it should start coming back and suggesting it should follow the pattern. So there it's relating the suggestion. Now it's saying that based on the word that we should try usage. I'm going to ask it a couple questions real just can you add color? All right, then I'm going to say always have color. Does this fit the pattern? So if we put usage in here, we can see that the U is not, it is good. We haven't used S before. The A is in a good place. We haven't used G, and the E is in a good place. It will try to see it's added. It's given us another word, but I'm going to stick with what we have. So we're going to stick with usage. If you don't tell it explicitly to follow the pattern, it gets confused sometimes and it won't. So it's always good to specifically state there, let's use the pattern. And I always tell it to give me the pattern before it guesses a word. Hey, we got a green. At least they tell me that's what's green. By the way, I can't see the chat, so if there's any chat or anything going on, feel free to interrupt and let me know. Interrupt anytime with questions. This is meant to be like a live demo, and so responses and additional queries are very welcome. Here's the updated information. You can see it's done a good job here. Here's the summary. We know that it understood that. And here's a suggestion, because we have a new letter. Okay, here's a suggestion, but that does not match the pattern because A is in the third pattern. So we're going to have to say, I always lead by asking it a question. I never say this doesn't or whatever. I want it to go through and learn, and I want it to be able to come to those conclusions itself. Now I'm going to say, why did, okay, actually I'm going to go back and I'm going to say, okay, you figured it out. And I'm going to say, please always use the pattern. Always double check for giving. Actually, I'm going to, just to show you how it works. I have a fat finger a lot when I'm typing, so it's not unusual for me to have typos, but it will analyze that and understand it. I'll make sure that I suggest everyone strictly follow the pattern from now on. Say, okay, now it's going to say value. Say, now I'm just going to double check that it's not straying. I'm going to ask it if this is in the knowledge. I'm not going to tell it. I'm not going to tell it what text file or anything to look for. I just wanted to check its knowledge.
Hey, Joe, what do you mean by straying?
So what I mean is that when you're pushing it to do something strict, it gets confused. It can get confused if it's not spelled out correctly. And if you put anything, or if you've given it a command in the past that may be conflicting, then it just goes out and tries to do the best that it can. And a lot of times that'll be wrong. I guess that's one of the things they call hallucination. And that's why when you're doing these iterations, it's important to repeat them often. You'll see here in a little bit, I'll actually ask it, have I caused any confusion? Can you read everything? Can you understand everything? Just to make sure. These iterations, for me, I can do iterations for an hour, and that's a lot of, I save all my sessions so that I can go back over them, but that's a lot of text back and forth and things to remember. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. All right, so let's take a look at value. By the way, if anybody thinks they know it, just go ahead and shout it out, man. I like that. We haven't had a V before, but A is in the wrong pattern, is in the wrong place, right? This still is no good. And when I was working on the finished one, this is where we had a lot of problem. And it says right here, it's sorry that it didn't double check. It's always very apologetic. And I've never heard of this word. It's really struggling right now. I'm going to go back, and this is cool. Let me share this with you guys. This is something that ChatGPT can do, which is pretty cool. I just took a screen capture of where we're at right now, and I'm going to ask it, please give me a summary of this image. Now that's pretty cool. There also comes a point where I don't know why, I'm pretty sure I could write a Python script or tell it to help me write a Python script that could go through and say, just show me words that where the third letter is an A. It just has difficulty with that at times. So on occasion, I've had to enter a word that I knew maybe everything wasn't in the right place just to give it some more clues. Quick, looks like it might be good. We know that E is not in the last place, A is good, and U is good. But I'm going to go ahead and enter it because it's really desperate to. You can have fat-fingered or misspelled words, and it will, like this one, like yellow right here, right? And it will understand it anyways. I typically don't try to do that when I'm doing iterations because I don't want it to have to work too hard. I don't want it to have, just in case it's going to misread a word, or I want it to be able to focus on what it needs. All right, so here's where we're at. A is locked in third, U is in the word, but can't be in the first, second, or fourth positions. E is not in a word at all. See, that's not right though. Just like you're talking to your children when they couldn't get math or something, you do the same thing when you're talking to the GPT. And it's saying that it can do strict pattern matching and it can do semantic elimination. And it's giving us a new approach. So it's asking us if we'd like to try it. I'm going to say yes. We know that alter is not going to work because we're missing the E.
I have a question as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I guess maybe not in this state, but once it's done training to where you're satisfied here, how far back does it remember? Will it remember all of the previous entries? Reason I ask is in this case, we know looking at it that like you would belong in the fourth position just because of where the yellows were placed earlier, but would
Right.
it be able to know something like that in the end?
It should remember for the entire session.
Okay.
In the, I guess you could say the production version of this, I have it saving the response and putting a date to it, and then I've told it to not ever recommend it again. Essentially, it's updating the knowledge for previously used words without actually updating the text file. However, I have a plus subscription to ChatGPT, so it remembers my previous chats. And I think that you would have to actually go back to the same chat. And I don't know if you have experience. Let me go to it real quick. And I'm going to go here. So you can see here where it has today. These are all the things that I've been doing. You can see that I've been working on a GPT that creates things for Agile and posting videos, right? So these are all my past sessions. And if I go to any one of these sessions, you can see it brings up the history. I don't know if this is a feature for, I know that you have to have at least have an account, but I can't tell you whether or not this is a feature for the plus. If I go here and I tell it I want to see my custom GPTs, here is the production. And I believe that if I say, show me past words. So it is, so anyways, does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome, anytime. So I think we're in a kind of a loop here with it. I'm going to ask it to just start suggesting 5 more words. And it can be as simple as, I've been saying pattern, and it may want requirements because it's got more than just a pattern. I've got instructions for it to look at different things in the knowledge for different reasons. If you notice right here, it'll say view analysis. And this is the actual Python code that is running in the back. You can see this is the way it's written. It's looking for a word in a wordly list if word letter 2 is A, but that's not correct, right? So it's very lost, and I'm just going to say, give me words where A is in the. It seems to like the word position over place, and that may be because the knowledge that I've given or its own knowledge, it uses the word position more. Let's tell we want words with letter A's in the third position and includes a U.
Joe, did you write the Python yourself entirely, or did you ask the GPT to do any completion of Python or originate any Python?
It's doing everything in the background. If we go back to the configure, all I'm doing right now is talking to it. Now you notice it hasn't done really any updates yet because I haven't told it to. So this is the original instructions, but all I'm doing right now is talking to it and saying, I want it to do this, or why aren't you doing that? Can we add this option or that option? And when we get done and I feel that it's where it needs to be, I will ask it to update its instructions, and it'll rewrite all those instructions with everything that we've had. And then once you have that, then you go back, you play a couple games, you see how it was doing, you see how it does, and you know where it needs to have some corrections, and you go back to this create part right here, and then you start iterating again, and you play another game. One of the things that helps it a lot, it really doesn't have the ability to cheat. If you give it the answer, it will use that in the background when it suggests the words to better figure out why it is missing, why it's not guessing correctly. And that's all what's happening in the background. And you keep doing that until you're happy with where it's at. On the one that I've got dialed in real well, on this one right here, I worked a lot on it, and I found out that there was an 8,000 character limit, and I was at 8,002. Clearly, that was too much. So I had to go back in. I told it actually that we're over the limit. Please, let's just boil this down to just the absolute necessary. Make sure we're not repeating anything. Make sure that we're not unduly burdening it with tasks and requests that aren't necessary. And it was able to boil that down. Let's go in and take a look at that real quick. So here's the instructions for the one that I feel is really worked in, really tight. You can see that we have the game mechanics, we have a pattern, we have it validating against the wordly list, check the canonical list, and avoid repeats. So this is much more explicit than what we currently have, what we're currently working with. In word suggestions, I wanted to look at the most common words and the patterns when it's doing that. We don't have that in the other one. And then here's a strategy. And it suggested these strategies as well. Early guesses, prioritize new letters, track previous guesses, and weighted frequency. So it's doing some math on the background, handling feedback and conflicts, so that you can see. And then what we got here is a list of the files and what the files do and why it's supposed to use them, and then improvement, pattern memory, weighted frequency, stuff like that. So I didn't actually type any of this out. I continued to talk with it and go back and forth and do these type of iterations until I got it to a place that I felt was pretty good. And then I would work with it. Obviously, I would back this up. I'd copy it. I can show you right here in my OneNote. These are all the instructions that I've been saving for the Wordly GPT. So I save them before I tell it to write. And then it's just a matter of going through and talking to it and saying, listen, that's a lot of stuff. We need to streamline this. For instance, here is this one right here is the 8,000 word response or 8,000 character response. Very detailed, right? clearly way too long. It's trying to look at way too many things. And part of the iteration that we're going through now would be to close that, right? So, but this is not where I want it to be. Because it doesn't include these none of these words include an E, and I'm going to say also the letter E. You shouldn't have to capitalize the letters. I find that the less ambiguous that I am when I'm doing iteration, the happier that it'll be. Ooh, suave is a new one, right? But we've already used the S, but I'm going to put it in here anyways. Let's take a look. Yeah, that was not a good word. And again, I think back to your question, that was Carl, right? It writes this in the background. So this is just saying that in the background, I'm writing these Python scripts against the knowledge that you gave me to try and match this pattern. It's kind enough to give you the Python code. Potentially you could write this using that code on your own. All right, we're going to try.
I thought it was interesting that it defaulted to Python. It wasn't clear to me whether that would be the default language or not. So it was interesting to learn that.
That seems to be the case. It seems that Python is the case. I have in the past, I've done a couple of small projects where I've said, I want to write a project with you that's simple, using Python script. And it'll walk you through it, and it'll give you tell it what to do, and it will give you the script, and then you can go off and run it on your own. That's really the big thing that these iterative or these generative AIs are being used for now, is coding. So where we used to have to rely on a lot of people to do this coding, if you're good at prompt generation, and you still need to have some people that are good with code so they can understand it. But if you're good with prompt generation and understanding what it is and what the requirements are, I always say that it can get you 80% there in a day. You can also give it code and say, I want to add these functions or these features to this code, and it'll add those in there pretty good. Definitely, this can be used to speed up your development process. I feel better if I hand it off to somebody who's like a full stack Java developer before I would put it into production, do some quality control, run it through DevOps and make sure it's going through all of its controls and all of its tests. I'm going to say, give me a word. Yeah, but we know A isn't in the second. I think we have an understanding of what the iteration process is. I would like to. I'm not gonna solve the problem during this session, and that was never really the goal, right? It was just to show you what the iteration process is and how it works and what you have to do. Does anybody have any suggestions? Anything you think I could tell it to improve its understanding?
Yeah, yeah, this is really neat, and this is Matt, by the way. Thanks for going through this. Just a couple of questions.
Sure.
And I haven't done any searching just because I've been trying to watch and listen to the presentation. But is there any publicly available data sets? Or I don't know if the New York Times has an API directly into Wordle. Have you thought about using different historical data for training purposes? And then in your instructions, did you give it anything? And I couldn't see everything, but maybe you did this in the configuration. But in terms of using advanced data science techniques in your instructions, Bayesian theory and some information theory to help with gameplay and doing things with Wordle, because I know In similar games like this, when they teach it in like data science classes and things of that nature, typically like Bayesian theory is applied to refine guesses and things like that. So yeah, just a couple of ideas, but that's pretty cool. Thanks for showing us this.
Oh, first off, thank you for the feedback and participating, and it's certainly been my pleasure. And you're right. I have researched this to the nth degree, and there's a lot, as you might imagine, there's a lot of people that have differing opinions about how to use data science to come up with a better solution. I think Bayesian is awesome. That's something I've never really thought about. I just kept working with it until I got better. When you could see in the previous, in the one that I consider production, can you see this?
Yeah, I can see it.
So here it is. Here it is suggesting things like pattern memory, weighted frequency, dynamic strategies, conflict detection. But I believe,
perfect.
yeah. But I like the
Sorry,
Bayesian. That's okay.
Yeah, I missed that. Yeah.
And that's to show you that that's just what I've done with talking with it. And that's a great idea. I didn't think about adding more of the data science pieces in here. I could easily say, please use Bayesian when you're applying this, or please use whatever else is on there. The one thing to mention though, when you were talking about training your data, because this is a chat GPT, it has been trained. So it's got supposedly, I think everything up to the internet has up to 2022 or 2023. They recently had an update with it. And so we don't really train it. We're just leveraging what's already been trained on, which is where this becomes the difference. This knowledge right here, this is where if you're going to do it really, even if you're going to do an enterprise level GPT or going to use an Azure GPT that's going to be specific to you, this is where the money's at. This is having that knowledge, having that data. It could very easily, I could tell it to go find the words, and I could tell it to do favorite starting words, and I could tell it to do other things. But here I wanted to do it because I wanted to be specific, and I know this data is correct. Imagine that you're a financial institution and you've been in business for 100 years. You got 100 years worth of data that you don't even know what it means. You don't even know what to ask it. You don't even know what to look for. And you could take that data and put it into a generative AI like this, and then just start asking it questions, or using RAG or something like that, and just start asking it questions and starting to refine it and could do these iterations with it. That's something that if you're a data scientist or you've worked on things like this, that's something that would take a room full of data scientists months or years to be able to narrow down, and then you'd have to tell the SQL guy and draw a Venn diagram about what it is you're specifically looking for. With this, of course, the CE level person or their assistant, whoever does it, could just go in and say, I want to understand the pattern of deposits during times when inflation was this percentage or that percentage, and it could look against those values. This is where the money's at.
I'm with you 100%. Yeah, I was more just saying the most up-to-date Wordle answers. You know what I mean? Because obviously I know that these frontier models are only trained up to a certain extent unless you're using some of the publicly available models to train your own based on up-to-date data. But just as an example, one of the things that I started doing was refining sort of my college football gambling practice utilizing a custom GPT. And what I figured out was I had a lot of success with just like outcomes and really, really great predictions with being able to tap into publicly available APIs just because all the data was already organized, and then having it really just update as like games happen like this year. So that's what I was talking about, because I know that it's not like you really have to give these models like any kind of historical data because they're trained on the entirety of the internet. I was just saying that I know what the cutoff point is. I was just curious if you had looked at like any Wordle APIs to say like, all right, within the past couple of weeks, like these have been all the answers just to help the GPT. But yeah, that was more what I was saying.
So there is this at the bottom, which is create a new action. And in here, you put the schema for that API in here. When it gives you the schema in JSON, you put that in here, and you can actually import it from a URL. And I've done this in labs, but I've never done it like this before. But it will retrieve information right from APIs. That is, you're a little bit advanced for me. However, I would love to see, if you would like to connect up sometime else, I would love to see how your gambling strategy is going. I would love to be able to dive into that with you to get a better understanding. If that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I could, because we do a ton, like whenever we, depending on the AI tool belt that we use at Orchard and what I use personally, it depends on what I'm trying to build. But yeah, for the most part, and we talked about this at I think at the last Cincinnati Builders Forum too, when he was talking about tool belts and just when you're building AI agents, and I consider custom GPTs AI agents because they do a specific thing. In this case, it helps you solve Wordle puzzles, connecting APIs and just making sure that again, you have the right protocols in place because they do fail a lot. But yeah, that can be a bigger conversation. I'd be happy to show you I call it my pigskin predictor. So I'd be happy to show you that at some point.
Absolutely. I love that. I love the creative names, right? It's awesome. Yeah, let's make sure that we connect after this. And this is Matt, right? Yeah, here we go.
Yes.
Okay. I'll look you up, or look me up on LinkedIn and let's connect there. My stuff will be at the end of this. So
Sounds good. Thanks, Joe.
hey, you're welcome. So I'm going to switch over to now that we've got 10 minutes to go-ish, I'm going to switch over the one that I think is baked. I've given it where we are currently, right? And it's come back and it knows like U is not in position 1 or 4, S is not in the word, E is not in position 1 or 5. And that's not right. It's not in position 1 or 4. Now it's looking for words. It seems that there are no valid words to meet this criteria. We try a different strategy. I have had a lot of luck with this model over the last couple weeks. And it figures that when I take her out and kick the tires, I'm going to tell it to remove the letter and focus on the fixed word.
You guys are talking about Bayesian, but I think you need to add Murphyan methods.
Is that Murphy's Law? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah. Murphyan methods. That's right.
I have been known to tell it to give it bad information and to tell it that maybe the A is, I don't know why it's doing this. I may need to restart. Yeah, it's really confused. Oh, okay. We're in a demo. That's why. There's why. Yep, S should say S is not in the first. Q and K are in a word, but not in the first or second. Steak. Yeah, but E is in the wrong place. We know that we haven't used, we know that K is not there. So I'm going to say follow the pattern.
Is there anybody else on the call today who's using GPTs like this to specifically work on commercial use cases or even personal use cases like this? Is anybody else on the call doing this?
Yeah, Carl, I can speak to that. At Orchard, we're always trying to develop certain AI agents to do certain tasks, and we've done that. We're a marketing agency, but we've done certain things with Google Ads and Google Analytics 4 and our project management software, and just like working on internal workflows. And then I personally, like I said before about the college football one that helps me predict outcomes of scores and things of that nature, that too. But yeah, I'm very familiar with building custom GPTs. It's a nice platform, pretty easy to use.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Anybody else? Is anybody else out there using this? Or is anybody, for example, using something from a partner company where they've built it and you just have to populate it?
Hey, Carl, this is Matt. We played around with GPTs as well for personal use, but automating small tasks. Did a small one for a friend who owns a small bottle shop to help them do inventory and research data for some of those variables and help value old antique bottles that they get. Yeah, this is a great way, and then any businesses, SMBs, we always suggest is a great way to start, where you don't really have to have a lot of coding background to start programming these.
From an enterprise perspective, the other thing I've been messing with is Microsoft's Copilot. When you were talking, I don't know who was just speaking, when you're talking about repetitive tasks, you're talking about stuff to do for more productivity. You can interject a chatbot using AI, using Azure's AI, and ask it to do specific things for you. And they've actually got a really good one with the Office 365 Copilot. And one of the things that I use ChatGPT for a lot is just to say, hey, I need to write this recruiter a letter, right? And here's the job description. Tell them why I'm awesome. Stuff like that. But yeah, the Microsoft Copilot, I guess what I'm saying is the Microsoft Copilot and the Azure AI integrates very good into the enterprise, depending on how big.
Nice. Yeah, I've used mainly OpenAI teams and Anthropic teams right now. Haven't played with Copilot too much.
On the Microsoft side, it's something maybe worth exploring too. If you, depending on what your license is, 365, if you have access to Power Automate, there's a lot of pre-built AI-based workflows that if you have a GPT account, but then there's other workflows that don't involve GPT as well. And they have a pretty large AI hub, but we've used that a lot for like Slack communication. I use it to respond to email, where Power Automate literally responds. It's trained on my mailbox. Then GPT automates my replying to emails to people, and then all I do is just approve it. But yeah, if you're just something to explore, if you haven't messed around with Power Automate, it's definitely worth looking into and just looking into their AI workflows because they're pretty easy to spin up.
Yeah, Matt, I have, that's what I did is that I created an agent or a chatbot that you tell it that you want to create a user story, right, for your Scrum, for your Agile project. It walks you through the entire process. What's the name? It gives you various personas that the story can be used for, and then says, as a this, I want to do what, works you through that entire thing, creates an acceptance criteria based on the information that you gave it. And I use Power Automate to send it to a SharePoint list. And then that SharePoint list is set up to look like a Kanban board. I'm
That's
sure
awesome.
that it's a lot. And the hardest thing was changing the format of, I forget which one it was, but it should have been an integer, right? And it wasn't. It was, I forget what format it was. That's what took me the most time. Other than that, it just went together really easy. And that's why I was talking about the stuff with what Microsoft is doing, because it's so tightly integrated. That's always been their play. Everything already is Microsoft. Might as well just keep using this. But if you combine those tools, the SharePoint, the Azure AI, the Copilot, you can really just do some pretty cool stuff. Beatty. That's not it. I'm not doing well here, gang. I'm sorry. Usually it does really well. It's not getting me anywhere.
It's not about the destination, it's about the journey.
I appreciate you telling me that, but I still feel like I have to solve this thing. But it's 7 o'clock right now, and I don't want to keep everybody later than we should be. So let me put this right up here. There's some information on me. If you would like to, just as I haven't said this before, but just so you know, I am currently in the market for positions. So if you got anything you think or know somebody, my bank account and I would really appreciate that. But other than that, please, I really enjoy this, and please reach out to me on LinkedIn, Matt, especially you. Let's connect up. I would love to go through and see all these different things and continue to learn. This is a great group, and Carl, I'm happy that you included me. And I guess we can end now unless everybody wants to talk more.
Yeah, the only thing Joe, I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate the preparation and the fact that you really let us get inside, not only within your model, but inside of your thought process. I want to also thank, everybody for participating, and that's what's going to make this worth attending. So I really appreciate that. And then my only other announcement is we need more people to volunteer. I want to try to have it be at least 3 months ahead. So I would just really ask if you have something to share, you can see how we're doing this. We want this to be a community of helping each other, having these conversations. So please do reach out to me. Even if you think you're not quite sure it would be worth sharing, I bet you money, everybody would really appreciate it. And then finally, if you have friends, colleagues who are builders who you might think would benefit from being part of this, encourage them to reach out. Let them know, obviously, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And through it, I just want to have a quick conversation with them. And as long as they're cool with the way we're doing things, they're more than happy to have them join. The reason I'm trying to keep it around Cincinnati and Dayton is just, I'm hoping at some point that we'll be able to meet in person. But frankly, at this point, if you want to invite people who aren't in the region, as long as they understand if we do end up being face to face, that we'll have to say goodbye to them at that point. But who knows when that would happen. If you want to have some folks that are not from around, as long as we stay virtual, that's okay for me. It's because fundamentally the objective here is for folks to learn best practices, learn from each other, and build some relationships. That's what we're all trying to do here. Okay.
Thanks, Carl. I just put the link to the GPT in the chat, and would definitely appreciate everybody giving it a try if you have a chance, and give me some feedback and see how we can improve it. The other thing to remember here is that none of these, when you create a GPT and you put it in their store, right, they're all free, and none of the code is locked down. So you can go in and take a look at the instructions that I've created. I can take a look at anybody else's. They have talked about monetizing the GPT store, and if they do, I think they're going to have to they're going to have to stop that practice. But right now, if you go to the GPT store and you search something, you like it and think that maybe it should change a little bit, you can actually clone it and make the changes that you like. Okay, everybody, I think that's it. If nobody else got anything else, I definitely very much appreciate you being here.